You just don't see the reason for it. Like, what does it matter? And then if you can do that a few times, just little bitty things, next thing you know, you've been determined. Yeah, if you're struggling, you might not be the best person to decide what you need to do next. Sometimes you got to listen. And some of our flaws are just more visible to people than their flaws are visible to us.
Hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And I've got a question for you real quick. Do you know what it's like to survive the storm? I'm sure you do, but my guest today, Andy Campbell, is a man who has walked through the fires that would consume most of us. He's gone through childhood abuse, a battle with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and the devastating loss of his youngest son to suicide. He is also an author that has built 15 core beliefs and turned them into a book, which he is here to share with us today. So, how are you doing today, Andy Campbell?
Doing pretty well. Thanks for asking.
Of course. Happy to have you on. And
you know, some days are better than others, Keegan. You know how it is? Yeah. Today's an okay day.
Fair enough. Yep, some days are better than others, and other days are just straight up not good. So it sounds like you've had a lot of the run-ins with the ladder, and it's definitely one of those things that resilience doesn't come because we want to become resilient. We become resilient out of necessity. So why don't you give us a rundown of your 15 core beliefs and how they shaped your life?
Well, I think thanks first for the opportunity to talk about it and share with other folks. It makes, some of these things a little more, I don't know if I'd say worthwhile, but useful to having experienced them. I think the way my mind works is I tend to I need to see patterns. I see patterns in things. And so it's easier for me to see a pattern, name the pattern, and then when I need to, I can fall back or I can rely on it. And so it's just kind of the way I've survived things, when things don't go my way or when there's been some really bad thing that's happened. I like to kind of dig back in the file and find something that says, well, you can make it. Like it may not be like a universal explanation, but it'll be an explanation for you enough to get you through this time. And so over time, I just kept collecting these phrases that were really kind of meta phrases for a much bigger picture. In my mind, I don't actually, when you speak, I don't hear words, I see pictures. And so for me, these phrases, what I call the core beliefs, they represent a picture in my mind that I can hang on to when things are not going well. And so, they're things like no one outruns the universe. It's just a reminder to myself that you cannot outrun it. So you might as well face what's there, face the problems, face yourself, face your past. And it also takes away some of the, along the way, there can be a buildup of anger, resentment against people who have done things to you or created situations that you've had to deal with. And it's a reminder that they can't outrun the universe either. So I don't, maybe I shouldn't spend as much time thinking about them because I believe in universal principles. And so one of them is you can't run away from the universe. Another one is always fall forward.
Okay.
We're all going to fall. Yeah, we're all going to fall. I just watched a video by Michael Jordan and he goes, maybe I just made it look easy, but I missed 9,000 shots. I was trusted with the basketball 26 times to make the winning shot and I failed, and I missed. And, I've lost almost 300 games. And he goes through all this stuff and he says, so I've been a failure a lot. And that's why I'm so successful. And I think it's an interesting take. It's real, but always fall forward is just a picture I have in my mind that we're going to get punched in the stomach. We're going to get hit in the face. We're going to, something's going to knock us either backwards or, bend us over. Right. And so it's like, you gotta, it's just a mental picture that reminds me, if you're going to fall down, do your best to not fall on your back. You don't want to be a turtle and can't roll over, can't get back up. So if you can, when you're falling, fall forward, because then at least you're pointed, you can get up a little easier. You can, when we lost our son, you just try to fall forward because there are days when you can't do anything. You just claw your way to move forward, metaphorically move forward an inch, a half inch, you just something to keep moving. And you kind of need to be in a forward direction so that eventually, you start moving a little bit more than an inch a day. Eventually there's, there are days when you don't want to get up and even take a shower. You just don't want to get out of bed. But if you do,
Mm.
that's a big win, that's a big win for that day. So, there's all kind of, be religious only about religion. There's a lot of things in this world that we think matter and we think it's worth arguing about, or, being overly competitive with, or, blaming somebody else, or just, we won't even sit down and break bread with somebody because, they have a different view, on some things. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm a believer. And so I think there are those things that, probably everyone has that are fundamental to them. And those things, which I think are very few actually, like sometimes we give like lower level things this really high priority, in our relationships. And it's like, well, so to me, what represents that kind of higher order thing for me is like religion. It's like, okay, so if you want to argue about that, or if you want to take a really serious position on, whether you believe there's an afterlife or not, I dig that. That's cool. We can do that. Yeah. But if we're talking about, do you like the chicken nuggets or the sandwich? Like, that's just not, it's just not. And there's a lot of things like that, I mean, why argue with your wife about which direction you take to go to the grocery store? I mean, it's whatever. It's just a reminder to me that, make sure that if you're really being adamant about something, it's worth being adamant about.
Ooh, Yeah.
And, I say that a lot at work with people. We work on projects and I'll say, but I'm not religious about it. If you want to change it, I'll live with that. Let's just get to whatever the right answer is. And so, and when you're dealing with bad circumstances, sometimes people will, either I would think maybe I'm not making enough progress, or somebody would say, you need to do these 3 things. And I'm like, man, I would do them a little differently. Like the way you're talking about doing doesn't really fit me. And they would get kind of religious about the exact steps or process that you have to go through. And I don't want to do that to somebody, I mean, so again, it's just a reminder to be careful about what you prioritize. Is a non-negotiable.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a few of them in between that. I think number 14 is the necessity of perseverance.
Gotcha.
We have to, it's actually is really like, I mean, perseverance, if you don't persevere, there is no opportunity to succeed, whatever that is, whether that's just staying alive, whether that's, making a comeback from some terrible thing, whether that's getting over or reaching a point where you can forgive people for childhood sexual abuse, whatever that is, you have to persist. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, you got to persist as long as you humanly can. So it's a necessity. It's not an option, right? It's just perseverance is not an option. It's a necessity. So there's a number of other ones, but those are, they all kind of revolve around those topics. Like when I think about quitting, I think about perseverance is a necessity, not an option, right? When I think about, am I open-minded to, something or some process, then I remind myself not to be religious about it, Yeah. And to be able to be persuaded, because sometimes when we're in a bad place, we're not really the best judges of what we should do to get out of the bad place, So, sometimes you got to be willing to be persuaded. Yeah. So those are a few of them.
Okay. Man, I'm really glad that we're able to have this kind of conversation, because it's one of those things that resilience is something that is really hard to build, because a lot of the times, and we have to sit there and really dig deep sometimes. Sometimes we may not even know where to look, but I think if, like you said, we just fall forward, that'll help out a whole bunch. And did you know that there's an African proverb that says movement is life?
No, I did not, but that makes a lot of sense, it does. It's one of those things, if you think about it for a second, which I was just doing because you just shared it. But it is pretty deep. Like, it seems very surface level, but it's pretty deep,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the moment we stop moving, the moment our heart stops beating, that's death. And like, who's to say when movement stops, it's not a death of some sort? And we sit there on the couch just wondering what we're going to do with our lives, scrolling through the TV, or just mindlessly watching the Roku channels. scroll
Yeah.
by, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like we can't let ourselves just wither away, essentially. And whenever we're faced with a lot of tough battles, it feels like that's all that's happening is we're getting chipped away at, and we're not having anything added onto our statue, right?
Yeah.
So,
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you.
I was just thinking as you're saying that, I think one of the challenges is, when these things happen or a succession of things occur, or we find ourselves in a really tough spot or something very difficult, working our way through and, dealing with an addiction, dealing with the loss of someone, in our case, our son.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, it's so overwhelming that you don't actually know what to do next. Right? Like you just, sometimes you sit and you doom scroll social media because you don't know what to do next. It's probably not good for your mind. It's not super positive, but you don't know what to do next. I had many years ago, I had 3 words tattooed on each arm. And I had thought back to my ancestors and how did they survive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because they had nothing, like they were at one point, like my great grandfather married a Native American daughter of a tribal chief, and and that's how they ended up settling part of South Alabama, and then the family just kind of grew instead, and so. But when they were growing up, there was like, these people are out in the woods. It's like the wilderness for them, right? And so you go 3 generations, they're still basically in the wilderness. I mean, there was no toilet paper, there was no feminine products, there was no air conditioning, there was nothing. It's step on the wrong thing, you die from tetanus. Cut your hand, you get gangrene and it comes off. Like there's really hard life actually, comparatively.
Yep.
And so I kept thinking to myself, like, how did they do that? Like how, because you hit some some rough seas, and you need to know how somebody else kind of navigated it, right? Their exact solution might not fit but there's still probably some good information. And so I came up with 6 words that I thought encapsulated, again, because I had to have a picture. I had to have like a phrase that would capture a picture for me. And those 6 words started with honor, courage, determination, perseverance, wisdom, and success. And honor was to say, if you start with the right intention, begin with an honorable intention. And if you did that, then what I think I saw in them was that when they started with an honorable intention, that when difficulties came, it gave them the ability to have courage, right? Because they believed in what they were doing. They believed that's what they were taking care of their family, or they were trying to put food on the table. But they were doing these things, and so it gave them courage. And if they could show courage over and over again, small things, not one big courageous act, but just small acts of courage, then if that happened a number of times, that's when we call people determined. Like they're determined because they've just had these small acts of courage over and over and over again, and people like, damn, Keegan won't quit. Like he's just determined. And then if you can show determination, multiple times, then people call that perseverance, because you were just determined. You just persevered. You just persevered. So, like, people say, well, what is perseverance? And I'm like, well, it's small pieces of courage multiple times that turn into small pieces of determination multiple times. That just, to me, is perseverance. Like, it just naturally happens. Like, you don't have to go find something. It just, all of a sudden, you persevered, And if you could persevere enough times, then you might not be a wise person, but you would be wiser, because you will have persevered enough to gain information, like to learn things about yourself, about the world, about the universe, about other people, but you got to hang around. Like, you got to persevere to become wiser than you were when you started. And if you could become wiser, then I thought, well, they always said Solomon was, at his time was the wisest man that had ever lived, and he was pretty successful. So I was like, well, then that must be the key to success. You must be wiser, maybe not wise, but wiser to be successful. So, like, when I would go through these things, I just had 2 more bouts with cancer this year, of all things, probably from, I don't know, all the drugs I've done over time. I ended up with 2 different times, I ended up with a cancerous lesion on my tongue, and they had to go in and take it off. And, just things happen. And But sometimes just said, and that's why I go back to it. Sometimes you get, you're just depressed, you're down, you're anxious, you've kind of, you're on the verge of losing hope. Having courage can just be getting up off the sofa. It can just be walking outside and letting the sun hit your face, right? It can just, it can just be getting up and getting a shower, because you may not even feel like doing that. It may literally be courageous to go take a shower because you just have nothing left, You just don't see the reason for it. Like, what does it matter? And then if you can do that a few times, just little bitty things, next thing you know, you've been determined. And then if you can be determined several times, like, I'm going to get a shower every day. And, I'm going to walk outside every day. And I'm going to say hello to somebody I don't know every day. I'm not just going to pass people blindly and not even make eye contact. And you do these little things. And the next thing you know, you have persevered. Because I think the mind, I read some things about this, that when you're worried, anxious, depressed, focused on a problem, that one of the techniques that can be used is your mind can only focus on one thing at a time, which is why we ruminate on things and become hyper-focused.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've learned to do is I think they call it like somatic movements, basically like movement stuff.
Yep. Somatic expression.
Yeah. Is that what it does is it breaks your mind from thinking about the problem at hand, because it has to pay attention to hand-eye coordination, and it can't do two things at one time. Like the whole multitasking thing is actually BS. We just fast switch.
Yep.
Right? We switch between things and we miss what's in between switching. Yeah. But if it happens fast enough, everybody's like, I'm multitasking. It's like, no, not really. That focus for just a second, like do something that requires your mind to think about something else. Whether it's, I don't know, something as, silly as dribbling a basketball, or just taking a walk and looking at the ground. It's just, it breaks that cycle so you don't have to ruminate.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think all those little things are how when people say someone is resilient, or they say they've persevered, and people are like, well, how do I get this perseverance thing? And it's like, you start really small, and you just keep putting those together. And it'll seem like you're making no progress, and you'll still think, why am I doing this? Is this really worth it? But if you just keep doing it over a period of time, you'll actually look back and have something to be proud of. I'll be 10. I actually made it. I made it a week. And then that turns into I made it a month.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's all about those little steps.
Yeah, and you got to celebrate them. Like, you got to appreciate them, not just write them off. Like even the small stuff is if you hold on to it, like it's a milestone. It helps give you the courage to keep taking steps.
Yeah. I found that whenever I was first in my recovery journey, I wasn't really celebrating like I should have, because it was one of those like, it's a little small. It's like here and there. I'm looking for the big grandiose like 10-year recovery kind of thing, and it's like, well, I can only get there by doing it 1 minute at a time. And if I keep treating each success like that wasn't a big deal, then I'm just reinforcing the same thought patterns and stuff that got me into my addictions in the first place. So it's not really that good.
No, and I think people think, I've done this. This is the reason why I think people think this. I've asked people, and I've done it myself. It's like we almost lie to ourselves and discount. And so, like, when you feel like, hey, I should be celebrating this, there's that voice in your head that's like, what are you, effing stupid? Like, what are you celebrating that for? Anybody could do that. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, wait till you do something worthwhile.
Yeah.
I do think that is an outright lie that we tell ourselves. We shouldn't discount it. And any step you make in the direction you want to go, or anytime you do not stop, to the point about movement, anytime you can just persevere, celebrate that shit.
Yeah.
Just in your own head, just be proud of yourself for a moment. It's worthwhile to be proud of yourself.
Yep.
Yeah. Those matter.
Yeah, it matters a lot. Whenever I started working the 12 steps, step number 10, the daily maintenance step, it talks about sitting there and, figuring out like where I went wrong during the day and where can I improve tomorrow, essentially. But I found that if I only see it that way, where did I go wrong and what can I change? Then I was like, then I'm doing the same shit I was doing before. So I started saying, I'll take note of the things that I can change or that I want to change later, but I'm also going to take note of the things that I did different and celebrate those. Pat myself on the back whenever I don't blow up because someone triggered me and I didn't go off on them,
Right.
So
no, and like that's a big deal. Like it is like, and I do think like if we don't recognize, if we choose to not, and I think it is a choice to not recognize, right? Like, I'm a big believer that there's usually this quiet voice inside our heads, and then there's really loud voice inside our heads, right? And at least it is for me.
Same here.
And so like one of my core beliefs is there are no hard decisions, there's only hard consequences. And that's kind of based on, it was because of some things I went through with cancer treatment. I wrote that one down because it was, I'd come to the point where the chemotherapy was killing me faster than it was killing the cancer. Oof. And so I knew I was going to be, I knew I couldn't sustain it. And there was this quiet voice. It was really soft. And it kept saying, it never told me it was time to quit. It just said it's time to stop chemo. And to me, I kind of translated that as it's time to quit. But that's not ever what it said. What it said was it was time to stop chemo. And then there was this super loud voice. And it was like, are you stupid? It's like, are you stupid? Like, the cancer has regressed some, but, it'll just come right back. Like, you're just going to die. Like, and it's going to be a bad death. And then, like, what are you, a quitter? Like, now you're just going to, like, you're going to leave your wife behind, your children behind. You're going to do all this stuff. And it was just super loud. And then the little voice kept saying, don't pay attention to that. It's time to stop doing the chemo. And what happened was I did choose to stop doing the chemo. Like, that was a choice I made. I will not listen because the loud voice, all it knows to tell us is what it knows. And I think like the still small voice, it knows to tell us what we don't know. Like, it's kind of looking out. And so it's not going to tell you everything, like how it's going to play out. It's just going to kind of give you these little prompts. It's like, this is what you should do. And the loud voice, all it knows is what it knows. It can't see the future. So it's just telling you what it knows is that people with pancreatic cancer die really tough deaths. Okay. And, and it knows how to talk to you so that it can convince you to do what it wants you to do. Like, don't be a puss. Don't do you're a quitter. Don't do that, But what happened was I stopped doing the chemo. And without going through all the details, 90 days later, my oldest daughter found a cancer trial at the University of Pennsylvania for people with pancreatic cancer with my genetic mutation who'd had a good response to chemo but couldn't do it anymore.
Whoa.
And like that was 90 days later. And if I'd kept doing the chemo when I got there, they were surprised at how many rounds of this particular chemotherapy I'd done. And I said, well, it's like all I had. And they said, yeah, but if you'd kept doing it, the drugs we're going to use wouldn't work. And so by stopping the chemo and then 90 days later ending up there, I went through a treatment program there and that almost killed me, but it didn't. Oof. And afterwards, they couldn't find the cancer on the scans anymore. So, I'm 7 years, a little over 7 years from diagnosis, and they can't see the disease anywhere. Now, I don't know all the reasons why, but what I am confident of is if I had listened to that loud voice, the fearful voice, I would more likely than not be dead now. And so I just encourage people to, do what they can to quiet their mind and listen less to look, if you're in the African, you're in the African savannah and that loud voice is saying, hey, that lion might eat you. Like, don't go near it. I think you ought to listen to the loud voice. I think that's good advice, okay? And the quiet voices might be saying, hey, man, this will be fun. Let's go play with the lion. So don't listen to that voice. But that doesn't happen that often. I mean, like, how many times are you really in a life or death situation? Not as much as we're afraid of it, right?
Yeah,
and
that's for sure.
Yeah, so I think some of it is just choosing to listen to the quiet voice. And to tie it back, I think it's almost always the quiet voice that is saying to you, that's awesome, Keegan. You did the right things today. Sure, there's a couple things you could have done different. That's cool. Tomorrow, because you made it today, tomorrow, you have the opportunity to do those few things different. But that's because you did great today, right? And then the loud voice is like, you're a fucking loser.
Yeah.
Like, what do you,
Pretty much.
like, you're like completely screwed up everything. Like, okay, set aside the good stuff. Let's talk about the 10 things you screwed up today, And so I just think we have to become disciplined to make sure the loud voice is only paid attention to, when it's some serious shit getting ready to go down. But other than that, I think the quiet voice is the better one to listen to.
Yeah, I'd have to agree 100%. I'm really glad that you were able to find that kind of treatment, or rather someone else found it for you.
Yeah.
Everything played out like it did, because that sounds like some synchronicity or miracle, whatever you want to call it. But that is something that, like you said, wouldn't have really happened had you not listened to the intuition, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, my daughter found it, and going back to kind of like be religious only about religion. Like, I had it set in my mind I was done. I was out. If I died, I died, but the treatments were too much. And I'd done like 16 rounds of this particular chemo. It takes 3 days because one of the drugs is so toxic. It takes 2 days. You have to wear a pump to get it into you. So it was 3 drugs over 3 days.
Wow.
Every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. And I'd done 16 rounds, and I was spent. My daughter found it, and I remember my wife called because I was like, I'm not calling. I don't feel like doing it. I mean, I was in pretty bad shape at that moment. And she did. And I was like, just leave it alone. Like, she's like, no, shut up, go away. And she stayed on it until she got to the right person. The right person's like, he's a great candidate, absolutely, bring it. Like, get here on Tuesday. It was on a Thursday. Tuesday we flew up, and I was in the trauma. Like, that's one of those things where I had to listen to other people, because in that moment I was spent. Like, I didn't have the energy to go. I didn't have the energy to talk about it. I didn't see really the purpose in it. But I set all that aside and trusted some people that wanted to help me. And I think that's another thing that we should do more often. Like, I mean, if you're struggling, you might not be the best person to decide what you need to do next. Sometimes you got to listen, and take some advice.
Yeah. And that can be really, really hard to do whenever you got that really loud voice in your head telling you what to do. So let me hit you with this real quick. You're talking about building perseverance and then becoming determined and so on and so forth. But one of the things that I thought about whenever you first were talking about it was, it sounds a lot like being stubborn, like I'm not going to stop or anything. But I think that there was an important distinction between the two. I think perseverance and stubbornness may be two sides of the same coin. However, I think stubbornness may actually be the part where we're saying, I'm not going to learn anything. I'm not going to try to get anything else out of this. I'm going to do it my way no matter what until it works. And having perseverance is going to be saying more along the lines of, I'm going to try and keep going, and I'm going to adapt so that I don't fail,
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction, because I do think you're right. I think it is two sides of the same coin. I think, and people will say, I'm just, or that person is really stubborn. And sometimes they say it in a positive way. I work really hard. I think words really matter.
Yeah.
What the words we say in our own head. So like, I don't use the word try. I don't like the word try. Now that's just me personally. Okay. Like some people, but when I hear the word try, as opposed to, so like if you said, Andy, come over and, we're going to go to this concert on Friday, like come by, pick me up. We're going to go to this concert on Friday.
Yeah.
And I said, Keegan, I'm going to try. I'll try. That's one level. Yeah. Or exactly, it's like, probably not going to be there, make other plans. But if I said, you know what, I'll work, I got a bunch going on, but I will work to be there. I still might not make it, but there's a level of commitment. Like I'm going to put effort into being there. Right. And so little things like that, I work to use those words. So if whenever I'm speaking to, just in general conversation, just anybody, if I will catch myself using the word try, and I will stop and purposely say, no, I'm working to do that. Right. Like I'm going to work to be there. I'm going to work to do this instead of I'm going to try. And so I think when somebody talks about being stubborn, I think it's, it's important to kind of gut check yourself. To me, stubborn is that thing, like you said, it limits curiosity. One of the other core beliefs is have an insatiable curiosity. And it limits curiosity. It limits your ability to be open to alternatives, especially when you're in a really bad situation. Sometimes your mind can only think of one way out. And, there may be I read something a long time ago and I keep it, I wrote it down. And it said that basically what it says is there's an infinite number of ways to get to the number four. And so it's like, well, it could be 2 plus 2. And like, if you ask somebody that, most of the times I ask people that question, they'll be like, they'll give me like the 5 typical answers, right? It's like 5 minus 1, it's 1 plus, 3, it's, 2 plus 2, it's 16 divided by 4. And then eventually they kind of run out and they're like, it's like, well, what about, 12 minus 8? What about 256 divided by 64? What about, like there's just this infinite number of ways to get there. And so I think stubbornness, the way I tend like to catch myself is, have I just determined there's only one way to get to the number 4? Like it's 2 plus 2 or fuck it, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like where I'm not discussing it with you, right? It's just 2 plus 2 or we're done. And I don't know if that's like, making sense, but
Yeah, it does.
I mean, perseverance is more like, how do I get to number 4? And I'm less concerned about how I get there than I get there.
Yeah.
I think stubbornness a lot of times is focused on how you do something. Well, how you like the process of getting there. And so like we get locked in on something, right? And I think perseverance is more like, stay focused on the goal. If the goal is metaphorically the number 4, why do I give a shit if it's 1 plus 3 or 264 divided by 64? You know what I'm saying? Like, why do I care? My goal was 4. It wasn't to prove to everybody else that 2 plus 2 was the correct answer. I don't know. That's kind of, odd way to say it, but I think you draw a great distinction, and I think it's really important because words matter, that we ask ourselves, are we being stubborn or are we being persistent? Like, and am I open-minded? Am I still remaining, curious? Am I willing to do things that maybe I didn't think of, somebody else thought of, at least give it an opportunity, kick it around in my head for a little bit and just kind of figure it out. Yeah. I think, stubbornness, I've rarely met successful, stubborn people in the long term. Like my grandfather was one of those people. He was really smart guy. He was just super stubborn. And so it just like he constantly ran into problems with being ultimately successful the way he wanted to. And I think, though, I see a lot of people who are successful that are they just persevere, like they know what their goal is and they're less concerned about, it being their way than it is achieving the goal. And, if your goal is to make it 30 days, whatever is happening in that 30 days, like, when we lost our son, the goal was make it another day, make it 2 days, make it 5 days. Honestly, didn't really care how I got there. I just know I needed to make it another day. And so I think you bring up a great distinction. And I think one of the ways that I've dealt with that distinction that might be useful to others is make sure you're using the right words, and check yourself. Am I being persistent or am I just being stubborn?
Yeah, that's a really, really good way to look at that, and I love that. So thank you for bringing that up. And I haven't heard that there's an infinite ways to get to 4, but you're right. There's a ton of ways to get to that number, or a few others, but I would say that number 4 is one of those magic ones that just kind of fits in almost anywhere. For some
Yeah. I mean, okay. There's other things that are more difficult to get to. The idea, though, is remain curious.
Yeah.
Keep your mind open, and don't let yourself get fixated on only one way to get to the solution. Right? There may be multiple ways to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But whenever we're dealing with perseverance and all that kind of stuff and building that resiliency, it may feel like we start off stubborn, but I think if we can have that insatiable curiosity you were talking about, I think that will help lead people to that perseverance mindset. And then that will also help people really possibly make them curious about the self-talk that they tell themselves, because like you were saying earlier, self-talk is super duper important, and I think that it is as well, because it's one of those things that I'm my worst critic. And someone just actually shared it not too long ago, and they said that people don't treat other people worse than they treat themselves. And that made me go like, holy cow, if some people are just straight up assholes, how mean are they to themselves in their own head? They are hurting a lot. I feel really bad for them. And so we come across these kind of people, and those are some of those weird variables that we come across. And we have to really be on our toes for that. And how do you deal with the people in your life or around you that just seem to be too stubborn to really let you kind of just skate on by?
Well, I guess it depends on how much I love them and how much I know, and how much I'm willing to give.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it is, there's something like that, again, it's kind of like the be religious only about religion. It's like some of that shit they're not going to stop doing. So I'm just going to stop doing it. It's like as much as I can. And there's always those circumstances where there's always exceptions to every rule. But, if it's somebody that I am invested in and I want to influence them, I don't believe we can actually change people. But I think we can influence people. We can be an influence for people to, change themselves. And so I think, when, you just got to show people some grace, but it doesn't mean you got to keep interacting with them. I mean, like you can show them grace and feel compassion for them. You can even say a little prayer for them. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not as good at that as some people, are, but I do recommend it. I just don't do it as much as I should.
Yeah.
And, but I mean, I think there's some things that just aren't worth religious fervor. And sometimes you just got to be, you're just being stubborn. And, man, what's her name? Mel Robbins has a book called Let Them. And I don't listen to Mel Robbins. I don't really, I just don't follow Mel Robbins. But this book popped up on Audible. And, when I walk, that's about the only time I read and I don't read, I just listen.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. And, but her whole book is about let them. Like, let them and let me. And I think it's really interesting because I think that's kind of what we're talking about is that when people, somebody's giving you a hard time and you think, and I think that is correct. It's like, man, you must fucking hate yourself. I don't like, why are you behaving this way? Like, are you're pissed off at somebody, but it's probably not even me. Maybe yourself. Maybe it's yourself you're pissed off at. Mel Robbins says you have to let them. Just let them be. And then you let yourself decide whether you want to interact with it or not, whether you're going to participate in that or not. And so I'm still learning how to do that. Okay. Like it's still like, one of those things where I have a tendency more to not let things pass by. So I think that too goes back to stubbornness. There are some things that I've been stubborn about. And then there's things that I have persevered through. Yeah. And so I'm working to be less stubborn and more perseverant, So yeah, I think when people like that show up, it's really hard for me, like somebody, you accidentally, you move in front of somebody in traffic and, they think they're pissed off at, their girlfriend because of some reason. And you don't know that because you're in another car. How would you know what they're pissed off about? But now they're pissed off at you and they're yelling and screaming. And, my normal response would be, to engage, it's like, okay, but I think I haven't found that does in the moment. It's like this short-term pleasurable gain, but in the long term, it's been corrosive, not helpful. So I don't know, man. I think it's like rub yourself, like check yourself. That's about the only answer I've got on that. It's like check yourself because I'm still learning. Yeah. I'm still learning.
Yeah, I love that because it shows the human side to everything because we don't know everything, and whenever I hear rules or laws or like whatever have you, it's like, okay, so in this situation, I must adhere to this rule always, no matter what. And that's not really the case because there's so many different variables to go into everything. Like, it's like you'll never know until you're in that situation. And I think that's why it's really important to show ourselves grace for the times that we do quote unquote mess up because I don't think we intentionally mess up. Like, I know, like those in addiction, such as myself, we can look back and say that we messed up knowing it because I wanted to quit, but at the same time I didn't. So that does fall on me. So I was messing up. But a lot of other mistakes, quote unquote, that may have happened weren't necessarily like, oh, I'm going to do this just to go ruin my life all of a sudden. It's just something that happened and was like, I'm going to make a decision in the heat of the moment. And it was probably the quote unquote wrong one. But I can't read the future off of like my phone screen, so it's like we have to experience life. And if we don't offer ourselves grace to experience it and mess up, then I think that's where we might become stubborn and set in our ways. I don't know.
Yes, I mean, it's a good point. It's a good point, man. I think, so to me, having a religious perspective is important, and
Mm.
and to me, to me that has been important to me. I'm not proselytizing or whatever. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me
yeah.
personally, right?
Yeah, you're good.
Because I like to think of the Creator as a caring, loving entity.
Hmm.
And, like there are just times when we get down on ourselves, more than
Hmm.
anybody else would. You mentioned it earlier, right? Like we're way more critical of ourselves than other people might be, or maybe because somebody's been critical of us, we hang on to that and we internalize it. We keep
Hmm.
being critical of ourselves louder and louder. That voice gets stuck in our head.
Yeah.
But, my take on it is that it is grace that, um, it is grace that I believe the Creator shows us. And in my view, there's not a lot we can do for the Creator.
Mm.
He's gonna like he created. So like, what are you
Yeah.
gonna do for him? Like anything I give him, he already got.
Mm.
Christmas for like somebody who already has everything. Like, how are you gonna give something back? I think for me, from my recognition, I work to remember that if the Creator will show me grace,
Hmm.
I should show me grace. Like if the Creator is understanding that I'm human, that I have flaws, that I've lived in situations that, early in childhood. Look, I was sexually abused as a child a number of
Hmm.
times, and that leaves emotional and mental scars that don't, you can think you forgot it, or you can think that, if I bury it, I won't deal with it. And I made a lot of bad decisions along the way,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
and it may have looked like I was partying like a rock star, but what I was really doing was just, I
Hmm.
was just dealing with it, in the way that I knew how to deal with it. Whatever that substance was, just something that would, kind of carry me through, at least
Yeah.
numb it for a little while.
Hmm.
So as you start working through those things, and I'm imagining that I don't know like the addiction story, right?
Hmm.
But I imagine I became mentally addicted to the way I dealt with past
Oof.
things, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I was stuck in the bad habits of just
Hmm.
dealing with it that way, and it actually did kind of become like it was like I had to go through recovery to stop dealing with it the way I was dealing with it, because I'd become so accustomed to it. My body was accustomed to it, my brain was accustomed to it, my soul was accustomed to just dealing with it a certain way.
Hmm.
And those things weren't, I mean, they overall, over a span of time, I don't know how I'm still alive. Way before pancreatic cancer, I probably should have been dead. And, I've had those, I think it was it Janis Joplin or Hendrix or somebody, who asphyxiates on their, or maybe it was John Bonham, asphyxiates on his own vomit.
Hmm.
I've come close to that a couple times.
Man.
So, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
like you got to do something different, but you don't do something different. And then finally you do something different,
Hmm.
and you can look back on it and go, man, I've just been so stupid. Like I've just stopped completely. Like, it's just like, what a moron, like, and every other thing that you can think about calling yourself. And then one day I thought, maybe it was a therapist that told me, but I had to accept it. It was kind of like, if the Creator's willing to keep going along with this, like he's willing to know that you're going to fall down, you're going to screw up, you're not going to, you're going to make errors, you're going to have setbacks, you're going to make 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and 2 steps, like you're going to go through this. Then maybe one of the keys, one of the courageous things, the little courageous things that we can do that build perseverance is we can show ourselves grace and stop calling ourselves names. and like think to ourselves, I might have done some stupid things. I might have made some really bad decisions, but you know what? I have come to a place to make better decisions. And that's a big win. That's a big win. Just recognizing that it's time to do it differently. And so I think that is showing ourselves grace with an appreciation that we are all flawed. And some of our flaws are just more visible to people than their flaws are visible to us. But, they're walking around with a lot of stuff too. So, social media is just not, like the pictures on Facebook, or Instagram, they're not real. Like people were just, you've seen everybody doing this. And it's like, they were bitching at each other 30 seconds before, and then they take the picture and it's all sweet. And then they're back to bitching at each other again. It's like, so it's not real, So show yourself some grace, show yourself some grace. It's not easy. Sometimes it's not even believable, but I do think it's necessary. And it does take a little bit of courage to just accept that, you know what, I could have done that different. I probably damaged some things, some relationships, some people along the way. I probably damaged my body along the way. But better late than never, better late than never. Yeah. So anyway.
No, thank you for opening up like that and sharing all of that insight, because you're right. Like, I love the way that you put that we all have flaws and only some of them are more visible than others to some people and everything, because that's entirely true. Even though someone may have a physical deformity or handicap, then that's obviously visible. It's something that everyone else can see, and they learn how to deal with it. And a lot of people may be handicapped or have some deformity on the inside that we can't see and have to deal with. And like, whenever looks are deceiving, it's like, hey, you look like you're just fine. You look like a happy-go-lucky person. Why aren't you smiling? Why don't you got some pep in your step? And it's like, if only you knew what was going on inside my head, man. So
yeah, dude. I mean, it's, people would think. I think people would think everything was golden for me. Yeah. Now they might wonder why I drank so much. They might wonder why, I had kind of risky behaviors. They might wonder why. But all in all, he seems good, man. He seems good. But on the inside my brain, I was handicapped. Like it was like, it's like part of it. It would have been, like as if I had a stroke and one side of my body wasn't working, but it was just inside my head. That like half of my reasoning, I was kind of like handicapped. And so, I mean, I think like the process of the way I've been able to think about it is the process of recovering from that handicap, making progress. It's like, it's like if, I've had a couple back surgeries and they send you to PT, you go to physical therapy. And so I think, and when I've been in physical therapy, I might have been frustrated that, like one of my legs wasn't working the way it should have. I didn't beat myself up on it. I just went to physical therapy on a regular basis until it got stronger and it got stronger, and then I could walk on it, and then it would move mostly the way I wanted it to. And it would, and I think sometimes we should think, maybe we should consider that when we're going through the process of coming back from something, that we're really just taking ourselves mentally or spiritually through physical therapy, and it's not going to be, you're not going to have the perfect strength on day one. You're not going to have, the perfect outcome on day 4. It's going to be a grueling grind, but if you stick to it and, because you get it from physical therapy, you don't go, well, that sucked, I'm never coming back, like, because if you don't go back, you're not going to get better. So you just like, okay, well, yesterday wasn't a good day, but Tuesday, I will be there and it'll hurt. And I'm just going to keep doing it. And eventually you start to see some progress. And I think, for us, like emotionally, for me, like that was part of the process. And, in dealing with and confronting, because people be like, man, Andy's cool, but he just fucking blows up. Something will just set him off. And, he's not going to back down from that. He's just going to go at it. And they wouldn't know that on the inside, it was just all this anger had been built up, and anything could set it off. So I finally started looking at it like, okay, which I think helps with grace. It's kind of like, okay, I'm in physical. I'm in mental therapy. I'm in spiritual therapy. Physical therapy, right? Whatever is metaphorically that way. That's what I mean. It's like you go through this thing, and so some days it's just going to hurt, and some days you're going to underperform, and some days you're going to be disappointed in how things go, and some days you're going to be better than others, and you're going to think you're making progress, and then you're going to take a step back, and then you got to, it's like it's okay. Then we'll show up next time, and we'll just keep getting better. And so I think that's one of the ways that we can encourage our own selves to keep making progress, right? It is a process, and it's not going to be great day one. It's going to suck day one.
Yeah, physical therapy does suck day one, and it is all about that perseverance, that pushing through, and knowing that it's probably going to suck, but the reward is going to be so worth it. And
Keegan, though, because you don't want to stay in that spot forever. And so physically we're like, oh, well, if I got a shot to not be like this, then I'll take it. And the same thing applies to us emotionally, mentally, take the shot, man.
Yeah. But whenever it's kind of one of those things, we don't see our emotions until someone blows up or is just depressed all the time and everything. And we tend to have that societal rule of like, hey, they look normal, so they better act normal. And everyone's normal is apparently like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine, I'm great. And then just going on doing whatever, and on the inside slowly dying or being really bad. And it does no one a service of any kind to sit there and be fake like that, to wear that mask, because if we're not honest with ourselves, we can't do anything about it. And like you were saying too, it's all about that little bit of 1%, because one day you may not need to go to physical therapy and everything like that. Or if you're working on yourself and you're going through that spiritual therapy and stuff, and then something happens and where you usually might have blown up, you don't, that's a breakthrough moment, and it's not just one of those like, woohoo, it's like a, hey, like, oh, shit, I didn't blow up on that guy for calling me a douche,
No, it's a big win. And you gotta, I think you have to embrace that bit of self-encouragement, because there's not always going to be somebody around to encourage you. A lot of times the people around, they can be discouraging, right? Because you can look at somebody and like, shit, they're doing much better than me. Why can't I pick up the pace? It's like after our son passed away, we'd see people, and, we were in a group of people that had lost children, and you think, man, they're just doing so much better than me. Must be fucked up. Like they are, you know what? You don't know what's going on with them. You don't actually know how well they're doing. You know what you think you see. That's it. You may not even see, because through their eyes might be telling a whole different story. But, you're just thinking, I think, look, another core belief, because they're not rules. You mentioned that before. People have asked me, like, well, how do I apply that? I'm like, I don't know, man. They're just core, they're beliefs, that morph, and that, the picture underneath that phrase is what you need it to be at the moment, right? But they're all positive statements to kind of reaffirm and provide yourself with for me, provide me with some self-encouragement. So one of them is compete only with yourself. Look, I'm competitive. I don't know. I've been competitive, I guess, all my life, and it's kind of like that stubbornness versus perseverance. There's like there's like that competitiveness. I don't know what you call it, but it becomes detrimental. Like it's like you're competing over everything. And so I know when I was going through the cancer treatments, one of the things that I would tell myself is pay attention to no one. Only look at what's happening to you. Like it's not about, this treatment should be working better. It's not. It's just, what are you doing in this moment? Are you getting 1% better? Are you putting in the effort? Like I would ask myself, are you putting in the effort? Are you doing what needs to be done? And I think, because sometimes when we're competitive, it's easier to blame someone else. It's like, so I think competition is a great thing. I like, competitive things, but I think when it comes to our own lives, that when you're dealing with these traumatic events, and when you're going through this process of working to come back and to live a better life, competing with someone else is the most detrimental thing you can do, because the only way you can compete is to compare, right?
Yeah.
And so the comparison should just be to yourself. It should just be like, am I getting better? Did I make it one more day? Did I make less than optimal decisions yesterday, but I've improved on those today? Did I do, I just think it's really important to not, you can use things as like a guide, but like a goal, like you could say, man, that person did that. That's a goal of mine, but you don't know how they did it. You don't know what they went through to get there. So once you kind of pick the goal, I think it's just really compete with yourself. Just, are you doing the best you can? If there's something that you look at and you're honest with yourself that there's something you could do better, then do that. But that's between you and you, like that's not between, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just, I think for me, it's really important to remind myself the only person I'm competing with is me.
Yeah, for sure. Because if we're constantly really competing against others, no one really comes out on top per se, and people just get hurt feelings, and no one really, wins in general. Because if you're king of the mountain and you're the only one up there, then it's going to be pretty damn lonely.
It is, and you don't even know how they got. You don't even know. Like, we don't know what's going on. Like we don't know what people are struggling with. We don't know what shortcuts they took. We don't know anything. So yeah, I found that to be useful, not just in overcoming setbacks, but just in life in general. If I want something and somebody else wants it, it's really easy to start competing and take. It's kind of like like when you ride a motorcycle. Well, you do the same thing in a car, okay? Like car, bicycle, motorcycle. Wherever you look, like your hands will go that way, like right, you steer it that way. And so the picture I have that reminds me about only compete with yourself is, if I'm paying attention to someone else, that means I'm kind of mentally, I'm looking at them, which means mentally I'm steering myself toward them. I'm getting off my track, right? I'm getting out of my lane. And, that's what you want to, what I think we want to do is to compete with ourselves. Let's keep our eyes on our goal, our lane, where we're at. And then if the road bends, fine, look around the bend and and kind of flow with it. But I think part of the thing with competing with people or comparing ourselves to people is that we have to be really careful that when we're looking at them, we're not steering into their lane, because their lane is their lane. Like, that's their life. If you start competing, you start steering over there, then you start living their life. And that's not your life. Your life's back over in your lane. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes entire sense, because it's essentially saying, well, maybe not what you're trying to say, but one of the things that I got in my head picturing it was like, if I'm driving and I'm going to be looking this way, it's like, oh, hey, that guy's got the better lane. He doesn't have any potholes in his or whatever. So I want to be that car instead. I want to be that driver. I want to be that. And I think it's a real disservice to my own physical body to say, hey, I don't like you anymore. I want to be someone else.
100%, man. It actually is. That's exactly it. It's like, and it's not easy. That's the thing. Like, we talk about it and it's like, oh, they're just going to do it. Man, that shit's not easy. But if we can just little by little stop comparing and competing and just keep our eyes, there's that's what, like the saying, like, keep your eyes on the prize. To me, it's like, oh yeah, well, that's kind of a cheesy thing, but there's some truth in that, right? It's like, I remember there was a story. This lady spoke where I work at. She was you remember a show called The Greatest Race, something like that. Anyway, like they do these continent-wide endurance things, And so she was on a team that did that stuff, and she's telling this story about her. She was the only female on the team, but they were in this race somewhere in South America, and they were way ahead of the second place team. And so they got to this cave and they had to climb, do a climb to this ledge where there was an exit out of the cave. And so it was all mapped out. And so they were way ahead of this team. So they weren't worried about it. They kind of took their time. They're going up the wall. They get up to the top. And as they get to the ledge, they look down and the other team is rolling into the cave. And all of a sudden they're like, oh shit. Like, we thought we were ahead. We're not that far ahead. Oh. they pack it up and they're, moving as fast as they can. So the next stage is to get to this river. And they have to get in these rafts and they have to paddle down and go through these rapids. And so she tells a story about they get in their raft, and as they're pushing off, they think they've made up some time and they've gotten further away. But just as they're pushing out, here comes the other team. The other team's been busting ass, man. They're like coming right after them. And so they get like 100 yards out into the river. Boom, the other team hits the raft. Now they're in the water. And so they're paddling as fast as they can, right? Because they've got, they've got competition.
Yeah.
And she keeps looking over her shoulder. So she's sitting in like the left front, and then right behind her is the team leader. And so she's looking, and so she keeps looking, and she realized that they kept catching up to her. And so, like they were getting closer and closer, and she keeps looking over her shoulder. Well, every time you look over your shoulder, you look backwards, you're taking momentum away from, like, you're not paddling, you're looking. And so, of course, they're catching up because you're slowing down. And so finally, the team lead gets tired of her looking over her shoulder. And she said he put his hands on both sides of her head. She was looking over her shoulder, and he not physically turned her head forward. And then she said all she saw was his finger come past her eye. And he whispered in her ear, "Winning is that way." And they ended up winning. And I took away from that, it's like, stop worrying about all the competition. Winning is that way. Winning's just like, this is on me. If I want the best time, if I want to succeed, if I want to get there, the only thing that happens by paying attention to other people is it slows you down. So compete with yourself and let everybody else compete with each other.
Yeah, I love that. That's some really strong words. And thank you for sharing that story with us. I'm going to have to try to see if I can't find that like in a little documentary or something.
Yeah, it was a speech that she gave. So I don't know if she's given it anywhere else. But, I wish I could remember her name, because it was one of the best, like people, you hear people who speak a lot, but it was really one of the best, because I thought it was a great life lesson. It's like, sometimes you just need somebody to turn your head and be like, winning is that way. Whatever winning is, winning could just be making it through the day without falling apart. Winning is that way. So
winning is that way. Well, Andy, real quick, I do got to say we are at the end of this episode. Time just flew by. But where can people find you, and where can they find your book at?
Easiest way is, so when I was going through cancer treatment, people would say, "How are you still alive?" Or they would ask, different people that knew me. They're like, "How is he still alive?" And they would say, "Well, just ask Andy. He'll tell you." And so the easiest way to find me is my website is askandycampbell.com. And you can find the book there and everything else.
Sweet. Well, Andy, I just got to say thank you very much for persevering through everything that you did. Thank you for competing with yourself and winning, and just pushing through some other cancer scares that you had earlier this year.
I'd like to do that, and congratulations to you too. Surviving is a big deal. Whatever that is you're up against, surviving is a big deal. So congratulations on still being here.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And anyone out there that's listening, same thing goes to you, because we wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for y'all out there that just like to hear this little person talking to other really cool, awesome people. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and leave this episode here, but you can find Andy Campbell over at askandycampbell.com. And don't forget, you can find him on the website at retrievingsanity.com. But for everyone out there, don't forget, you got to love yourself. Try to love others if you can, but you got to love yourself first. And if you are having a mental health crisis, you can give the number 988 a call. And if you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, you can give the Trevor Project up in Canada a call. And I just got to say thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. This has been Keegan, and this has been Andy Campbell, and we will see y'all in the future. That being said, much love. Sean.